In this video, we're going to talk about dilations. A dilation means you're either going to get bigger or smaller by a certain scale factor. Twice as big, half as small, stuff like that, okay? And the way you tell is you take, I have a letter P here, and then I have P prime. Here's P prime. Actually, it's double prime. I don't know why I did that. Okay. You always go, you look at it from P to P prime. You can tell right here, if it's going from P to P prime, the shape is getting bigger. We know it's getting bigger. But you have to write it in a fraction. And you always have to put the P prime at the top of the fraction. P prime always goes on the top, and then P goes on the bottom. All right. Well, what is P prime? Well, P prime is the whole thing. It's 12. What is P right here? Well, it's from 0 to 8, so it's 8. All right, so we can say, well, let's reduce this fraction. I'm going to divide it by 4 on both sides, so that's going to be 3 over 2. Well, I can say I can divide up, and 2 goes into 3 1.5 times. So I'm going to say this shape was enlarged by a scale factor of 1.5. Does that make sense? Sorry. It's enlarged by a factor of 1.5. It was enlarged by that factor. All right, let's go over here now to the next one. We're going from P to P prime. Well, we know it's getting smaller. We know it's getting smaller. But I still have to put P prime up top and P on the bottom. Okay? So what's P prime? 18. So it's 18 over what? The whole thing is 30. I can reduce that. I can divide by 6, and that will be 3 over 5. All right, that's a fraction that's less than 1. Do you see that? So this shape has been reduced by a factor of 3/5. What does factor mean? It means multiply. Okay, don't forget that. It means multiply. All right, let's go on to another problem here. If I already have a shape and they're asking me to dilate it, and that's what they're doing in this figure. So I have this shape, and they're asking me to dilate this by a factor of 1/3. They want to factor it by a factor of 1/3. All right. What that means is I have to take every coordinate number, multiply it by 1/3, get a new coordinate point, and plot it. All right, so I'm going to write down all these points here for you. So I have -3, 6. I have 0, 6. I have 3, 3. And I have -3, -3. All right. I have to take 1/3 of -3. What is 1/3 times -3 over 1, by the way? Well, can't I just multiply straight across? 1 times -3 is -3 divided by 3. Well, isn't that just -1? So look, every time I see a -3, I'm going to cheat a little bit here, so I don't have to do this a million times. Every time I see a -3, I'm going to say -1, -1, -1, -1. All right? Well, what happens if I say +3? Well, then isn't it just +1? So 1/3 of 3 is going to be 1. So every time I see a 3, I'm going to put a 1. All right. What's 1/3 of 0? Well, it's 0. What is 1/3 times 6 over 1? Well, 1 times 6 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. Divide up. 3 goes into 6 2 times. So every time I see a 6, I'm going to put a 2. Okay. There's our points. There's our new points. All right, let's plot it and see what happens. What do I have? -1, 2. So -1, 2, there's a point. 0, 2, 0, 2, there's a point. 1, 1, over 1, up 1. And -1, -1. Where's this? -1, -1. There's my new dilated shape. It got smaller by a factor of 1/3. Smaller, it reduced by a factor of 1/3. That's how you do it. If they ask you to enlarge it, if you have these points, watch. 4, 3, 2, -1, 6, -4. Let's say they want you to take that shape. I'm not going to graph it right now, but they want you to enlarge that by a factor, a scale factor of 2. Do you know what you're going to do? You're going to remember factor means multiply. 4 times 2 is 8. 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 2 is 4. -1 times 2 is -2. 6 times 2 is 12. -4 times 2 is -8. There are my new numbers. And I've enlarged it by 2, by a factor of 2. So you can, dilations means you can either get bigger or smaller. But when you have that p prime number, remember the p prime number always goes on the top. Always goes on the top. Put that in your notes. And then you just put the fraction and reduce it, and that's the factor that it was enlarged or reduced by.